All right. Hey, listeners, I'm Nat Mundel. I'm the founder and CEO of Voyage Media and one of the producers of Otzi, the Iceman Must Die. I'm super excited to be catching up with acclaimed actor Ethan Suplee, who plays the leading role of Rube in our dramatized account of the world's oldest unsolved cold case dating back 5,300 years. So, Ethan has spent over 2 decades in some of your favorite roles in Kevin Smith movies, American History X, Remember the Titans, to more recently The Wolf of Wall Street, The Hunt, Deepwater Horizon, Motherless Brooklyn, and Chance on TV. So, welcome, Ethan.
Hey, Nat, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, let's start out. Like, what made you decide to bridge over to podcasts and tell us about, any podcast experiences you've had so far?
Oh man, podcasts. I've been listening to podcasts for over 10 years, and it was something that I was riding my bicycle a lot in like 2011, 12, and I wanted to have something like that I could listen to. And there were some books on tape. This was prior to like Audible, but I found podcasts and I was like, oh, what an interesting thing where I can just listen to these great conversations or people like I forget the guy's name, but there was like an FBI guy discussing cold cases that I thought was really interesting, and Dan Carlin's hardcore history, and people talking about politics in a very non-commercial way that I enjoyed. Um, and then I was on a trip with a buddy, Kevin Connolly, who's another actor. We were going to Japan, and we got on the plane, and he said, "What the hell are you going to do for the next 14 hours?" And I was like, "Well, I'm gonna, there's this series of stories by Dan Carlin on the Mongolian Empire, and I'm going to listen to that, and that's going to cover my trip." And he was like, "What?" He just like had never heard of podcasts before. This was like 2012 or 13, and maybe 14. I don't know. It was a long time ago, and so I showed him. We downloaded the app. He downloaded those shows. He never slept on the plane, and by the time we landed, he was so excited. And then throughout the trip, he re-listened to all of those episodes, and then became somewhat obsessed with podcasts and the idea that like he could have like some kind of a big media presence, or people could have a big media presence without going through the kind of corporate loopholes that normally you'd have to go through. And
Right.
so it took him a while, but he created a podcast studio. And amongst my friends, I'm very much a contrarian. So if the group is saying something, I'm just trying to pick at it and tear it. And and he initially wanted me to come and do politics, and I was like, "There's no way I'm going to do that, dude. Like, you just want me to get canceled from Hollywood immediately because you guys generally share this kind of normal Hollywood consensus of the way things should be, and like, I'm just going to snipe at you from the sidelines, going like, why is that rational? How does that work? That's not functional. You guys are crazy. This is emotional. That kind of stuff." And I'm never going to talk about that openly. Like, that's private amongst like five of my friends. um I wouldn't even do that at a dinner party with people I didn't like love, and he was like, "No, you got to come do it." And so he started this company and he built this studio, and he kept saying like, "You got to come do one." And I just was like, well, the only thing that I feel super comfortable talking about that I think um, I could actually, and not in some altruistic way, because I definitely think there was some selfishness on my part too, in the fact that like I saw it as a way to also keep myself accountable on my own progress physically,
Mhm.
by making a statement like, "Here's what I've done." And by constantly talking about it, I'll reinforce the fact that I got to keep doing it.
Yeah, you have a big podcast of your own. What's it called, and how's that going?
It's called American Glutton. It's going great. It's a lot of fun, and I find out I just like to talk. So You know, you could say I have loggery or something like that, but I just enjoy conversation. I'm interested in people. And so in American Glutton, we just talk about like, you know, the various types of diets there are, what's helpful for people. And I'm not looking at it from the position that I know best, because I don't think I do. I think that different things work for different people. But just we're really into like physical goals and talking about that, and I enjoy it.
So Otzi the Iceman Must Die is a scripted show. And is this your first, or have you done some other scripted podcasts?
This is my first. I've talked about it with Kevin because he's been working on some, but we just haven't done them.
Oh,
I don't know what they're about, but this will be my first. Yeah, it's
we're
exciting.
super excited to have you. It's a great honor. So let's shift gears to Otzi the Iceman Must Die, and we'll just share quickly to listeners. Otzi is the nickname of a man found mummified in the Italian Alps in 1991 by some hikers, and he's thought to be the oldest homicide victim. So Ethan, tell us what you think happened to him.
The first time I was, I mean, I guess it was probably right around the time that he was discovered that I found out about him. But I think I like really paid attention because I believe Brad Pitt got a tattoo of Otzi on his arm or something like that, and I was
Wow.
like, "What is this?" And looking at it, it's wild. And you know, the thing I recall most from reading about him was the 4 pounds of like goat he had in his stomach that was still there. Like he had just had a huge meal. And I was thinking, like, what does this mean about how people used to eat back then? 4 pounds of meat, that's so much meat. Like, I don't think I could eat 4 pounds of meat in a sitting. Um, when I try, I get through like 2 pounds a day, but like in one sitting, that's insane. And I was thinking about it in those terms, but I think he's so fascinating. And then to hear about all the injuries he had, like it wasn't just that he, you know, like had a broken neck or had a fractured skull. It was like shot by arrows and broken bones and like all this stuff. Like they fucked this dude up. Sorry, you can bleep that swear. And I just thought it was so fascinating. And I remember my at first blush, I was really just like constantly making up stories as to what had happened. Like he was traveling in a strange part of the, like he didn't know the tribes, and then they didn't trust him and they chased him, and like I made up 100 stories about what happened to him
Oh,
just
wow.
reading the articles. And so the fact, and they were all kind of incoherent and kind of like, what if this happened and what if this happened? And so the idea that you guys have constructed a real narrative for him, I think is fantastic.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, so this show, it takes the point of view of the villain Rube, the man who in our dramatized account kills Otzi. And what inspired you to take that role, and how does it feel to play the oldest known murderer?
I think, look, I get, there's a lot of like cultural, anthropological rationale that goes into that, my thought process here. But like you want to make every character you play a real person. You don't want to make them some cartoonishly bad guy. And so I got to be honest, I think of Rube and I go like, you know all the shit he did was probably not all that inconceivable to be somewhat normal back then, at least for from his perspective. You know what I mean? So, like, yeah, he did a bunch of shit that today we would go like, he's just jealous. He's like not as clearly not as cool as Otzi, and like very lascivious over Otzi's wife and all of Otzi's wealth and nobility and all of this. But like, I also think back then it was a bit more dog eat dog. So like, Rube did what he had to do.
Well, not to say that we don't have jealousy and revenge in today's time period either, right? So it's
Right.
kind of timeless.
That's right.
So, playing a role from 5,300 years ago, what were the challenges in bringing that to life today for you?
really, it's like thinking about this dude's voice and thinking about the cadence and accents, and I didn't want to do anything that made him too much of like a stereotypical uh caveman or anything, because it's clearly not quite that old, but like I didn't want to lean into that so hard. So I just thought of him as kind of like a kind of big, jealous type of a person who has a higher idea of himself than probably anybody else. And these kind of people that I think about sometimes who are very full of pride without anything warranting that. And that's just kind of how I put them together.
Yeah. So, one of the great discoveries when they found the remains of Otzi was that there was this copper axe next to him. And it really just changed, our understanding of the Stone Age and essentially pushed it back 1,000 years because we didn't think that copper was smelted back then. And he was found not only with the axe, but copper and arsenic in his hair, which would be evidence of him actually doing the smelting. So, what role does the axe play in our story?
Yeah, I love the axe, and that's another interesting twist too, because there's no real evidence of that kind of stuff from that era other than this. There's also no evidence of people other than, oh, I mean, there's like mummified remains in Egypt and other places, but like we haven't seen murder before. So there's a lot of twists and turns with Otzi that I think are really fascinating. All of it just makes you go like, I don't think we have any idea what was really going on. We have these snapshots that give us one single frame of like an entire movie, right? And based on that one frame, we go, what's all the evidence and what narrative can we make up based around this evidence? Um, I even get into some weird ideas where it's like, no, copper was super prevalent and everybody had copper, and then some evil dictator came and swept all of it up and disposed of it because it was
Are
evil.
you pitching a spin-off?
I'm just saying what the things I make up. I love the idea that like Otzi was the first guy. He figured something out. And I also think there's probably the 100th monkey theory where there's like some other guy 100 villages away who's doing the same thing and getting killed also, but there's no evidence of it, right? We have this thing come together where we have this one magical moment where not only is Otzi preserved, but some of his stuff, and you get such a good glimpse of it by the traces in his hair and the things that are near him. And like, was he the Bill Gates of his time, or
Right.
or the Elon Musk? Was he the Elon Musk of 5,300 years ago? It's just such a, and then like, does that mean we need to get better security for Elon Musk today?
Yeah, right, right. Well, apparently all the crypto, fanatics are asking Elon to stop tweeting right now. So, maybe
Right.
maybe there's a Reuben there somewhere,
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure there is. Yeah, some little shitcoin guy is
right?
just like, you're fucking my life up. And yeah, it really juxtaposes everything for me. Everything, it's very hard for me to imagine things outside of my own experience, try as I might. And so everything I see with Otzi, I just go like, how would that work through my understanding?
Yeah. Well, so you seem to have a pretty clear historical passion for the Otzi phenomenon, but also an interest in true crime and unsolved mysteries. So, what are you watching or listening to in terms of those shows? And then, what grabbed you in this role? What led you to accepting it?
The gal who made Chance, the last series I did, her name's Alexandra Cunningham. She actually went on to produce Dirty John, which was a podcast.
Right.
And she has introduced me to I mean, there's a fucking amazing true crime book called A Fatal Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, which is all about how ancient Rome dealt with murder, you know, and like how many people were just getting killed, and how like infanticide was kind of normal, you know, like you didn't like your kid, you just killed it and buried it in the backyard and nobody really gave a shit. Like it's fascinating. This kind of stuff is fascinating. And then you get into certain ancient Roman emperors who were murdered, and you have these very like Pliny the Elder has a different account from Appian, and you get these kind of cross points of view that converge at one point, and so you try to take some information from both of them. It's interesting with Otzi because we don't have multiple narratives. We just have physical evidence, right? Which is really kind of interesting because we get to make up the stories. Where in Rome, most of the stuff that was all written long after the fact. So you have Pliny the Elder writing about shit that happened a century before, and Appian writing about shit that happened a century before. So you're still getting stuff second, third hand, and none of it, you know, you
Like
get
telephone.
reading these consensus history texts that it's all kind of like, well, I've taken a little bit from here and a little bit from here and a little bit from here, and I've tried to cobble together the most coherent story I can.
Yeah.
I think historical fiction, I love it. I mean, I love it. There's a book I read just before this called that Dark and Bloody River, about the kind of the filling up of settlers in the Ohio River Valley in the 17th, 18th centuries. And you get these accounts, and at least they're accounts from people, like firsthand accounts, but like I mean, we really dumbed down a lot of stuff that happened, you know, like the stuff that was going on back then. It's brutal. Like these people were brutal with each other, and it's just fascinating, you know.
Yeah.
It really does. It does make me think. And as I think back, it's like, this is a great time to be alive. We're all so safe, you know. We live so long. We have
Yeah,
so much access to
we
food.
forget that,
We
don't we?
forget that, yeah. But I then go like, well, you know, the settling of the Ohio River Valley sounds awful, and I go, but it was a hell of a lot better than ancient Rome. So like, you know.
Right. So what, you know, was there a few surprises in this role for you or in this story, or what sort of delighted you?
I actually didn't know about the axe until this story. And I didn't that this was my first. I had read about Otzi and I thought I had a good understanding of him, but the axe was some new thing that I then had to go and look at and go like, oh, they didn't make this axe up. This is like, that was real. Which is a whole other fascinating thing. You know, you find this guy. I don't know why I got hung up on how much goat he had in his belly. Which can tell you where my head is
Yeah,
typically at.
American glutton at the table.
Yeah. But the axe is actually more fascinating. I don't know how I missed that. It is like this weird, miraculous thing where you have like a consensus picture of history that then suddenly there's evidence going, you're wrong. You're just wrong. And like, we have no way to say how wrong you are because we only have this instance of it. Because of this instance, you are wrong.
Well, what do
So
you think? Sorry, go ahead.
no, it's all very fascinating.
Well, what do you think that the audience is gonna, sort of be delighted by, or why do you think they're gonna enjoy this?
I just think that, like, first you have the oldest known murder victim, right? And there's a lot of things where you think back that far, especially in parts of Europe, and you just think, well, these are basically cavemen. And then it's like, no, they're not. These are societies, these are there's probably agriculture and even more than that, like the shit they're doing to their bodies, the way they're eating, the way they're living, the weapons they're using, the tools they have. All of this paints a much different picture. And then you fill in the gaps with like real life. Like, yeah, there's jealousy, you
Yeah,
know.
they've got a neocortex like we do, right? So they're, they're going through all of these, psychological and emotional responses that we do currently in their society,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, totally. So what do you want to share with your, the listeners today and also with your fans? What are you working on and what do you want people to know?
I'm in Mexico doing a movie with Nick Cassavetes called God is a Bullet. I play a real scary dude. But I think the movie, though it will be quite very dark, will be a fun movie. Nick's been trying to make it for 20 years. Um, and and yeah, I think I really do think, you know, for me, history is one of, I think history and philosophy are my two favorite like scholastic subjects, simply because through those you get an idea of how we wind up where we wind up, and that for me is the most important thing to understand, because for huge periods of my life I just would go around going like, well, this is how it is because this is how it is. But when you get when you look back through history and through the ideas of philosophy, which have changed so much through time, if you go back to like Plato and stuff, where they first started going like, what's this thing thought? You know, we have thought, we can we can interact with our minds in a different way than the slugs. This is interesting. You know, you see a progression and you go like, oh, you know, there are certain turns and twists historically that really caused us to arrive here, and what could be different if we turned the other way at certain times, you know.
Amazing. Well, listen, man, it's been a thrill to get deep with you on this, story and your perspectives on it. I didn't, really know how passionate you were. So it's great. And, listeners, if you haven't watched or started listening to, the audio drama series Otzi, the Iceman Must Die, you got to start, and you can find it on all of your favorite podcast platforms, whichever one you listen on. We've been so grateful to have Ethan playing the role of Rube, and it's been fun to get to know you. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Nat. Good talking to you.
Yeah.